back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys! So I'm here today to do a book review, and this is a book review that I think many of you will be excited for because I gave this book a really high rating and I really enjoyed it. And the book I'm talking about today is Curse of Chalion, which is the first book in the World of Five Gods series, which is by Lewis McMaster Bujold, and this was my first ever Lewis McMaster Bujold book, and I have to say, I think she might be a favourite author just after this first book, and it just thoroughly impressed me. And I hear a lot of people talking about her science fiction work, a lot more than I hear them talk about her fantasy, but this is a fantasy series, it's an epic fantasy, and it follows one major character called Chalion, who is quite an old man in terms of fantasy. He's about 30, I think, when we pick up his story, and we're following him as he is travelling back as a beggar because he's lost pretty much everything in his life to the kingdom that he once served as part of the noble court. He was a page there in his youth, so he is travelling along trying to get back to this kingdom, and we pick up his story when he is in the midst of this journey. And he's not had much luck in his life. He's really had a kind of downtrodden lifestyle, particularly in the last few years. We find out later in the story that he served on a ship and that he was captured as a slave. We find out a lot more about his history. We find out that he went off kind of full of dreams and came back almost completely squashed of those dreams, and it's a really heartbreaking story. But the thing I most enjoyed about this initially, I think, was the fact that we were focusing on an older character, and the only other fantasy book I've really seen older characters being a main focus is Robin Hobb, and even in Robin Hobb's series he starts off as a young boy, whereas in this story we instantly pick up the story with an adult. He is an adult and he is a broken down man, but he's still got some fight left in him. So what I loved about this was that element, but then also the fact that the magic in this world is kind of loosely hinted at for most of the story. We only see explicit magic late in the book and at the very beginning, and in the midsection we're sort of seeing a lot of setup for this world, a lot of character development. I would say that Lewis McMaster Bujold did an excellent job of kind of getting me to get into this story very fast. Even though it's quite a slow moving story, the plot itself doesn't move that fast. I think I was hooked in very early on in the book, and I just enjoyed reading about these characters straight away, which is always high praise, and I definitely would recommend this series and this book. Chalion is a great character anyway, but then when he does eventually get to this court after kind of all sorts of strange things happen along the way and we get some secrets revealed about his past, once he does get there, things get pretty interesting because he finds out that he is supposed to take on the role of tutor to the Royess Iselle, who is about to travel to meet her betrothed, and she is travelling with Chalion as a kind of bodyguard come tutor. So he is teaching her all sorts of things. At first it's slightly a rocky relationship, but as time goes on they form a real bond and a real sense of trust is there. And he basically really just wants to look out for her, and she really appreciates him looking out for her later on. I think the thing that I liked about this is that even though it feels fairly classic in tone, it's quite slow moving, it's got a lot of setting, it's got a lot of world building, a lot of character development. Even with all those elements, I don't think it actually fell into any of the tropes that a lot of classic fantasies do. And I would say that this definitely had some really interesting twists that I didn't see coming, and some good moments that were just fascinating to read about. So if that all sounds interesting, then I'd definitely recommend it. We do have death and magic in this series, so magic is something that you can do if you provide a sacrifice to the gods, and it's a pretty dark, twisted way of doing magic, but it definitely comes in handy in some parts of the story. We also see that there are things like curses, as you can guess from the title of the book, laid upon various different characters in this story, and these curses have some pretty catastrophic repercussions for some of the characters, which we uncover as we go further in. I would definitely say that it starts out as a kind of adventure story, it goes into a mystery, it goes into a political intrigue book. There's lots of different elements to this, but it all flows really nicely together, and I felt as though this was just a really strong book from the point of go to the end. Honestly, I just found the depth and the way that Lewis McMaster Bujold developed her characters to be super gripping, super enticing, and following that up with a really great story too just meant that this connected with me straight away and just brought something new and original to the fantasy that I already know and love, and took things in a new direction with an older character, and it was just really, really solid. So I believe there are, I think, 3 in the series. The second one, I believe, has a different main character, but it is in the same world and it links on. So I definitely will be carrying on with this series. I've already got the second one, which is the Paladin of Souls, and I'm really looking forward to it. I actually did listen to the audiobook for this, and I would strongly recommend the audiobook because I thought it was really brilliantly narrated. I do think it's a slightly older recording, which means there's a little bit of static in the background, which is kind of annoying, but generally I just thought the actual narrator was really good, and I really, really enjoyed kind of being immersed in this story wherever I was. And because there's a lot of travel in the story, I always think it's quite nice to listen to fantasy when you're travelling yourself, on a commute or out for a walk or out for a run, which is what I do, and I just really enjoyed audio narration too. But of course you can read it. I'd love to know if any of you guys have read this, or if you've read any other Lewis McMaster Bujold, because this was my first book by her, and I'm thoroughly happy that she has a lot of other books out there in both science fiction and fantasy for me to now go and explore, because I have no doubt that I'm going to really enjoy her, and she's already definitely a really strong author for me. I ended up giving this particular book a 4 out of 5 stars, and I would certainly recommend that you go and check this one out if you can find a copy. So thank you all so much for watching. Leave me comments down below, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.